Shall we turn now to the 18th chapter of 2 Samuel? Absalom has come into Jerusalem, has taken the city, has sought to disgrace his father, and has now gathered the armies of Israel to pursue after his father in order to kill him and establish his position upon the throne. David has found refuge in a city known as Mahanaim. This is the place, or at least this is the name that Jacob gave to that place when he was fleeing from his uncle Laban and had just about arrived back into the land. His uncle had caught up with him and had really threatened him against trying to return, accused him of stealing his gods. And as Jacob bid goodbye to Laban, his uncle, he got word that his brother Esau, from whom he had fled 17 years earlier, was coming with a host of men. So he called the name of the place Mahanaim, which is the place of two hosts. David had fled there now. It was a place of refuge from Israel. It was across the Jordan River, which gave them a natural kind of a defense. And David is there in the city, and he numbered the people that were with him and set captains of the thousands and captains of the hundreds over them. So David gathered and conscripted together an army. No doubt a great number of refugees had fled with David because he places captains over the thousands, captains over the hundreds. And he sent forth a third part of the people under the hand of Joab, a third part under the hand of Abishai, who was the brother of Joab. They are both the sons of Zeruiah. And a third part was under the hand of Ittai the Gittite. Now you remember, Ittai was the one who had just recently come from Gath. David encouraged him to stay in Jerusalem, but he told David, hey, I've come to be your servant, and in life or death, I'm going to be with you. He evidently was a man of renown, probably one of the generals of the Philistine armies who had defected to David. And so David, recognizing the man's prowess and leadership ability, made him a general over a third part of the troops. So they divided the troops into 3 battalions. One under the headship of Joab, the other under his brother Abishai, and the third under Ittai. And David said, I will surely go forth with you myself. But the people answered, you're not going to go forth. For if we flee away, they're not going to care for us. We can run. They're not really after us. They don't care if half of us die. But now you are worth 10,000 of us. Therefore now it's better that you comfort us out of the city, that you give us support from the city here. You're the one they're after. They're not really after us. They don't care about us. They're after you, and you're worth 10,000 of us. So you stay here as our support. And so the king said to them, what seems to you best, I will do. And the king stood by the gate, and all of the people came out by the hundreds and by the thousands. So the people came out of Mahanaim, and David was there at the gates, greeting them or encouraging them as they went out to war. And the king commanded Joab and Abishai and Ittai, his 3 generals, saying, deal gently for my sake with the young man, even with Absalom. So here is David asking his generals now, hey, for my sake, go easy with the young fellow. David still had a love for his son, though he was a wayward son, though he was a rebellious son, though he was right now in the midst of his rebellion against his father, still David's love. Go easy with him. Take it easy. Deal gently. And all of the people heard the king as he gave command to all of the captains concerning Absalom. Each captain said, now, hey, go easy with Absalom. So the people went out into the field against Israel, and the battle was in the woods of Ephraim. So the men of David crossed the Jordan to meet them on the other side in the area of Ephraim, there in the woods, where the people of Israel who had gathered against David were slain before the servants of David. And there was a great slaughter that day of about 20,000 men. And the battle there was scattered over the face of all of the country, and the wood devoured more people that day than the sword devoured. Confusion in the wood as the people tried to flee from the forces of Joab and Abishai and Ittai. And Absalom met the servants of David. And Absalom was riding on his mule, and the mule went under a thick bough of a great oak. And his head got hold of the oak. And he was taken up between the heaven and the earth, and the mule that was under him went away. So as he was going through on his mule, you remember he had this long hair. And evidently his hair got hung up in the bough of an oak, and he was just sort of hanging there by his hair from this branch, because the mule kept going. And he just got ripped off. And so a certain man saw him, and he told Joab, and he said, behold, I saw Absalom hanging in an oak. And Joab said to the man that told him, you saw him, why didn't you smite him to the ground? I would have given you 10 shekels of silver and a girdle. Man, I would have rewarded you. And the man said to Joab, though you would give me 1,000 shekels of silver in my hand, yet would I not put forth my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing the king charged you and Abishai and Ittai, saying, beware and don't touch the young man Absalom. Hey, I heard what the king said. And I'm not going to touch that man because I know, David, and I know his commands. Otherwise, he said, I should have wrought falsehood against my own life. Man, I'd have done myself in if I had touched him. For there is no matter hid from the king. And you yourself would have been the one that the king would have ordered to kill me. Then Joab said, I don't have time for you. And he took 3 darts in his hand and thrust them through the heart of Absalom while he was yet alive in the midst of the oak. And 10 young men that bare Joab's armor circled about and smote Absalom and killed him. And Joab blew the trumpet, and the people returned from pursuing after Israel, for Joab held back the people. And they took Absalom, cast him into a great pit in the wood, and laid a very great heap of stones upon him, and all of Israel fled every one to his tent. And now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and reared up for himself a pillar that is in the king's dale, for he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance, and he called it the pillar after his own name, and is called unto this day Absalom's place. Just a little footnote on Absalom. He is slain. Interesting that he had no sons. He was concerned about that. They'll forget the name of Absalom, And so he, there in the valley, carved a pillar that they called Absalom's pillar. Today, when you go to Jerusalem, as you pass by the Kidron Valley, looking down in the valley from the area near the southwest corner of the Temple Mount, you see elaborate tombs that have been carved in the sandstone down in the valley floor. One of those monuments, the pillar, is called Absalom's tomb. Whether or not this is indeed the one that Absalom made and named after himself so that they would remember him when he died is a matter of speculation and question today. But at the time that this was written, it was still called Absalom's place. Then Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said to Joab, "Let me run and bear the king tidings, how that the Lord has avenged him of his enemies." And Joab said unto him, "You shall not bear tidings today, but you shall run another day. But this day you're not to bear the tidings, because the king's son is dead." Then Joab said to Cushai, "Go and tell the king what you have seen." And Cushi bowed himself unto Joab, and he ran. And Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, yet again said to Joab, "However, let me, I pray thee, also run after Cushai." And Joab said, "Why will you run, my son, seeing that you have no tidings ready?" But howsoever he said, "Let me run." And he said unto him, "Okay, run." Then Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain, and he outran Cushai. So here is the runner who was the son of the priest who brought David tidings. David had sort of appointed him as the official messenger or runner. And he is wanting to run and tell David the news. But Joab says, "You don't know the whole story yet." "Well, but I want to run." Running without a message. How many people are guilty of that today? "I want to run." "Yeah, but you don't have anything to say." "Yeah, but I want to run." "I want to preach," but you don't have anything to say. "Yeah, but I want to preach." It's not only important to run, but it's also important to have a message, to have something to say. And, he outran his buddy, but yet without the message. And David was sitting between the two gates. There were these little chambers within the gates. They had double gates, an outer gate to the city and then the inner gate. And between them were these chambers where the guards would defend the city. So if they would break through the outer gate, then the guards would meet them, and then there was the inner gate. And David was sitting between these two gates there in the city, waiting for the news of the battle. And the watchman went up on the roof over the gate over the wall there, and he lifted up his eyes, and he looked, and behold, there was a man running alone. And the watchman cried and told the king, and the king said, "If he be alone, there are tidings in his mouth." In other words, he's a messenger if he's coming alone. And he came near, and the watchman saw another man running. And the watchman called to the porter, and he said, "Behold, another man is running alone." And the king said, "He also brings tidings." And the watchman said, "I think the running of the first one is like the running of Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok." And the king said, "Oh, he's a good man, and therefore he must have good tidings." And Ahimaaz called, and he said unto the king, "All is well." And he fell down to the earth upon his face before the king, and said, "Blessed be the Lord thy God, which has delivered up the men that lifted up their hand against my lord the king." We've won. The victory is ours. All is well. And the king said, "Is the young man Absalom safe?" And Ahimaaz answered, "When Joab sent the king's servant and me thy servant, I saw a great tumult, but I don't know what it was." Now, Joab had told him that Absalom was dead. However, he didn't give him any details. And Ahimaaz knew David's love for Absalom and his concern, and he didn't want to break the news to David concerning Absalom's death. He just wanted to bring him the good news that your forces have victory today. So the king says, turn aside and stand here. In other words, he ran. He didn't have the real message that David wanted to hear about. He didn't have the news that David was most concerned with. And behold, Cushai came, and Cushai said, tidings, my lord the king, for the Lord has avenged thee this day of all of those that rose up against thee. And the king said unto Cushai, is the young man Absalom safe? David's chief concern was for the safety of his own son. Though his son was in rebellion against him, though his son was out to kill him, yet David's chief concern still was for the safety. Is the young man Absalom safe? And Cushai answered, the enemies of my lord the king and all that rise against thee to do thee hurt, be as that young man is. Absalom is dead. And the king was much moved. And he went up to the chamber over the gate, and he wept as he went. And he said, oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would God I had died for thee, O Absalom, my son, my son. David was wailing, lamenting over the death of his son. David had great cause to hate Absalom. And yet his love prevailed. Absalom was a rebel. He had rebelled against his father, yet David's love for him was deep, and David was forgiving. Absalom is a type of we who have rebelled against God, rebelled against the authority of God. And yet God loves us. God commended his love towards us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for the ungodly. Absalom was seeking to take his father's life. Man in his rebellion against God was so obdurate against God that when God sent his only begotten son, man took his life, whom they slew and hanged on a tree. David's love was so great for Absalom that he had wished that he could have died in Absalom's stead. Would to God I could die for you. God's love is so great for rebelling man that God was willing to die for man. And God did die for man. The thing that David desired but could not do, he could not die in Absalom's stead. God did do for us in that Jesus died in our stead in order to redeem us unto God. Such love, such deep love. Paul the apostle prayed for the church at Ephesus that they might, with all the saints, come to comprehend, to know the love of God, which passes human understanding. That they might know the length, the breadth, the depth, and the height of God's love. Oh, that we knew, oh, that we could only know how much God does love us. Look at what David was willing to overlook. Look what David was willing to forgive. All of the rebellion of Absalom. Absalom's own desire to kill his father. David was willing to forgive and overlook all of that because of the depth of his love for his son. Even as God is willing to overlook all of our rebellion, all of our sin, because of the depth of God's love for you and for me. And so in the cry of David, we actually hear the cry of God for his lost children, his desire to restore, his desire to forgive. And to that end, he sent his only begotten Son. Now it was told Joab, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom. And the victory that day was turned into mourning unto all of the people, for the people heard say that day how that the king was grieved for his son. And those that had been out to battle came by stealth back into the city, as people who were ashamed steal away when they flee from battle. In other words, those that had been victorious in battle, rather than having a return, a victory march, a gala celebration, they snuck back into the city like they had been defeated. Because of David's grieving as he did for his son Absalom, it caused them to be ashamed. And so the king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice, "Oh, my son Absalom! Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." He was really carrying on. And Joab came into the house to the king, and he said, "You have shamed today the faces of all of your servants, which this day have saved your life, and the lives of your sons and of your daughters and of your wives and the lives of your concubines, in that you love your enemy and hate your friends. For you have declared this day that you regard neither princes nor servants. For this day I perceive that if Absalom had lived and all of us had died, then it would have pleased you well. David, what you're doing is absolutely wrong. You've got to face up to the fact that had Absalom prevailed today, you, all of your other children, all of your wives, and all of your concubines would have been slain. That was his intent and purpose. Here you're wailing over the fact that this kid is dead. But David, he determined to hurt you and all of your servants. And I suppose it appears, David, that you wished really for us to be defeated and Absalom to be victorious, and then you would have been satisfied. You would have been pleased. David was blaming himself for what Absalom was. When David had sinned against Bathsheba, when God said your sin is forgiven, the Lord also said, but you're going to have to pay a price. The sword will not depart from your house. The shameful thing you did in secret is going to be done openly by your own family. And David was feeling the remorse of his own guilt for his sin. And feeling the guilt for his sin, he really desired punishment. It is an interesting thing that guilt does create within us a subconscious desire for punishment. I cannot feel freed from the sense of guilt until I feel that somehow I have paid the price. I have been punished. When we were children, if you grew up in a good home, you had no problem with a guilt complex. I had no problem with a guilt complex growing up. My father took care of that. And I had a lot of applied psychology in the right place. that relieved me of my sense of guilt. The sense of guilt is a horrible thing. It can weigh you down. It can actually make a neurotic out of you. And usually the subconscious desire for punishment is manifested in neurotic behavior. The neurotic behavior is actually the subconscious design to bring punishment upon you. David, though forgiven, was still feeling the sense of guilt, and as he saw what Absalom was doing, he realized that this is the pattern that I set before this boy. And he felt the sense of responsibility, and he felt that it was his guilt. And it probably would have pleased David had Absalom killed him. And the sense of guilt can be so great that you can wish yourself dead. There have been times when I wish I were dead, when I was guilty and I hadn't faced the music yet. The hardest thing in the world was to eat dinner when I was guilty. And I knew that right after dinner, my father and I were to have a meeting in the bedroom. And though I was usually a very hearty eater, under those circumstances it was hard to swallow the food. My head would be down. I knew that all of my brothers and my sisters were looking at me. They knew I was guilty. I knew if I looked up, my father would have a stern look in my direction. I really didn't feel like a member of the family. I was an outcast. I was guilty, and everybody knew it. And I wouldn't even lift my head to ask him to pass the meat. I'd just say, "Pass the meat, please." I felt totally outcast from the family. After dinner, my dad and I would go in the bedroom, and I'd get the invariably the question would come, "Why did you do it, son?" I never did have a good answer. And then either an apricot switch or a belt. Kids didn't have the protection in those days that they have today. Thus we behaved ourselves. My father would leave the room and close the door, and it'd be dark. And I would lie there on the bed, wishing I were dead. Wishing I could just die. Because then when they came in the room and saw me lying there dead, they would really feel sorry. And the thought of all of them grieving over my casket caused me to feel sad. But pretty soon, all of the excitement of the games and all in the other room was more than I could stand, and I would get up and wash my face and go on out, and hey, it's all over. I'm not guilty anymore. I can join the family. I can join the fun. The guilt is gone. I've been punished. When we get older, it becomes more complex. The sense of guilt is something that still weighs heavy on us. And we desire that somehow we can atone, we can pay, we can be punished. And David was still feeling the sense of the guilt of the sin that he had done. And he saw it in Absalom, and he saw it manifested, and he felt responsible for Absalom's deeds. And thus his grief over Absalom's death. In other words, it's my fault that this kid is the way he is. It's my fault that he rebelled. It's my fault that he has done these things. Had I been the kind of a father that I should have been, it could have been a different story. And so David's great remorse and grief was really over his own failure as much as his feeling sorry and his love for Absalom. He took the responsibility and the sense himself. And as Joab said, it looks like you would have been pleased more if he would have killed you. If we would have all died and they brought back news, Joab and all your troops are dead and Absalom's on his way, then you probably would have been happier. And that's very possibly true. Joab here was acting in David's best interest and in the best interest of the kingdom. There has been a general revolt against David. Absalom has led it. Though the armies of those who had rebelled have been defeated, yet the spirit of rebellion still hangs. And if David doesn't change his behavior, these men who put their very lives in jeopardy to save David are not going to go out again. And David will perish and someone else will take the throne. So Joab's strength and advice to David at this point is straight, but it is good. It is wise. So Joab said to him, now you get out of here, and you go out and speak comfortable words to your servants. Because I swear by the Lord, if you don't go out there, there will not tarry with you one man this night. And it's going to be worse for you than all of the evil that befell you from your youth until now. Man, if you don't go out there and change your behavior and speak comfortably, these guys feel ashamed, David. You've made them feel bad. Now you go out there and you speak comfortably to them. Or listen, they're going to desert you. And man, the trouble you're going to face is nothing compared with all of the trouble you've had from your birth till now. You haven't seen anything, David, like what you're going to see if you don't change and behave yourself right now. So the king arose and he sat in the gate. And they told unto all the people, saying, behold, the king is sitting in the gate. And all of the people came before the king, for Israel had fled every man to his tent. The enemy had fled, and so David's men all came before him. And all of the people were at strife. There was still the division throughout Israel. The tribes of Israel saying, the king saved us out of the hand of our enemies and delivered us out of the hand of the Philistines, and now he is fled out of the land for Absalom. In other words, is David able to protect us anymore? Though he has delivered us from the enemies and the Philistines, he fled from Absalom. And Absalom, whom we anointed over us, is dead in battle. Why don't we speak a word of bringing the king back? And so there was this buzz, Israel said, hey, we turned against David, but man, this is the guy that saved us from our enemies and from the Philistines. We went to Absalom's cause, but Absalom's dead. We better maybe get the king back. We better bring David back. And the king sent to Zadok and to Abiathar, the priest, who he had left in Jerusalem. And he said, speak to the elders of Judah, saying, why are you the last to bring the king back to his house, seeing the speech of all Israel has come to the king, even to his house? David hears that there's all of this rumbling going in Israel. The people are saying, boy, we better bring the king back. But he didn't hear anything from Judah. Now, he was of the tribe of Judah, reigning really in Jerusalem, the area of the tribe of Judah. And so he sends to the two priests and said, hey, all over Israel, the buzz is, hey, let's bring the king back. But you guys ought to really, be taking the lead in this movement. say to Amasa. Now Amasa was the general over Absalom's army. He was a cousin of David. He was not as capable a leader as was Joab and Abishai. Though he had a superior army, Joab and Abishai put him down. They defeated him. But David said, say to Amasa, are you not of my bone and of my flesh? Aren't we cousins? God do so to me and more also, if you be not captain of the host before me continually in the place of Joab. Now, he says, give Amasa a message. I'll make him the general. I'll put him over the troops instead of Joab. He was still angry that Joab had disobeyed his command and had killed his son Absalom. So he's offering really the leadership of his armies unto Amasa, who led the armies that revolted against David. And he bowed the heart of all of the men of Judah, even as the heart of one man. So they sent this word unto the king, return and all of your servants. So the message comes to David, return. Interesting sort of Jesus, who is the rightful king over the earth, who came as the Messiah, was despised and rejected, and has left the kingdom. But before he left, he said, you will not see the Son of Man again until ye say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. In other words, until you really pray for his return. During the Great Tribulation, Israel's eyes will be open and they will pray for the return of the King. So the king returned, and he came to the Jordan River, and Judah came to Gilgal to go to meet the king, to conduct the king over the Jordan River. Gilgal was the first place where the children of Israel camped when Joshua led them into the land. After they crossed the Jordan River, they encamped in Gilgal. From there, they went against the city of Jericho, but that was the first place of encampment. The men of Judah came down to Gilgal. David came to the Jordan River. They are across the river now from each other. And Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjamite, which was of Bahurim, hasted and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. Now, you remember this guy Shimei, don't you? He was the guy when David was leaving, was throwing rocks, cursing David and throwing dirt in the air. And David's one bodyguard, Abishai, said, let me go take off his head, David, please. Why should this dead dog curse the king? And David said, no, let him curse. Maybe God has said to him, curse me, so let it go. Now the king is coming back. Shimei thought he'd never see David again, and he was just getting in some last licks. But now David is coming back. And Shimei knows that his neck is still on the line. So he hurries down with the men of Judah to meet King David. And there were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him. So Shimei was probably a pretty powerful leader in Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin. And Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons and his 20 servants were with him. And they went over Jordan before the king. That is, these guys just came swimming across the Jordan River to meet the king. In their enthusiasm and anxiety to make things right with David, they swam over the Jordan to meet the king. And there was a ferry that was going back and forth to carry the king's household and all of his goods. And Shimei, the son of Gera, fell down before the king as he was come over Jordan. And he said unto the king, Let not my lord impute iniquity unto me, neither do thou remember that which your servant did perversely the day that my lord the king went out of Jerusalem, that the king should take it to heart. Don't take it to heart, David, don't. All that cursing and throwing of rocks and everything else. Those perverse things I did, please don't take it to heart. Didn't mean it. Don't impute iniquity to me. For your servant does know that I have sinned. Therefore, behold, I am come the first this day of all of the house of Joseph to go down to meet my lord the king. And Abishai, the guy who wanted to take off his head before, the son of Zeruiah, answered and said, Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? David, you're God's anointed. He cursed you. Shouldn't he be put to death? Abishai's still wanting to take this guy's head off. And David said, What have I to do with you, ye sons of Zeruiah, that ye should this day be adversaries unto me? Shall there any man be put to death this day in Israel? For do not I know that I am this day king over Israel? No, it's a day of rejoicing, not a day of revenge and bloodshed. Therefore the king said unto Shimei, Thou shalt not die. And the king sware unto him. So David swore to him, Hey, as the Lord lives, you won't die. I won't put you to death. Commendable on David's part. Unfortunately, David didn't really forgive Shimei. Later on, when David was dying and he was talking to his son Solomon, who was to succeed him on the throne, David said, I want you to remember what that guy Shimei did, how he cursed me and did those horrible things when I was fleeing from Jerusalem. Take care of him, son. You know what to do. So Solomon called Shimei after the death of David, and he said, I want you to move here to the city of Jerusalem. And it's sort of a house arrest. If you leave the city of Jerusalem, then as the Lord lives, you'll be put to death. But you can live here in peace until you die, unless you leave the city. If you leave the city, you're signing your own death warrant. So Shimei came and lived in Jerusalem for 3 years. But then a couple of his servants ran away, and he heard that they had run down to Gath. And so he left Jerusalem to go get his runaway slaves. And word came to Solomon that Shimei had gone to retrieve the runaway slaves. He called him in and he said, Hey, didn't I tell you? If you left Jerusalem, it was your life. And Shimei was put to death later by Solomon. A forgiveness that is not full is not a true forgiveness. When a person says, well, I forgive you, but I'll never forget, that's not true forgiveness. That's like saying, all right, I'll bury the hatchet, but I'll leave the handle showing so I can find it when I need it. And this is the problem with man, is that often our forgiveness is not a true forgiveness. And thus, because we often imagine God to be as ourselves, we don't have the proper concept of what true forgiveness is. We don't have the true concept of what God's forgiveness is. For when God forgives you of your sin, it is a total, complete forgiveness. It is never to be remembered against you again. As far as the east is from the west, so far as He separated us from our sins. God's forgiveness for you is total. It is complete. Never again will you have to answer to God for that sin that has been placed under the blood of Jesus Christ. It is gone. It is washed. It is cleansed. And it's tragic that our forgiveness is such that we are prone to bring it up again in the future. We're prone to throw up the past to a person. Yes, but you did that. Yeah, but I asked you to forgive me. Yeah, I forgave you, but, I'll never forget. Well, no. That isn't the true forgiveness. That you keep throwing it up at the person what you did. Well, you did that. And you keep throwing it up to them. That's not forgiveness at all. But unfortunately, that's human. That's us. But that isn't God. And we must not think of God's forgiveness in the terms by which we forgive one another. God's forgiveness is complete. You have been justified, which is even a step further. It's not just being declared innocent or forgiven, it's being declared so innocent as though you had never committed it to begin with. It's wiping the slate clean. It's the erasing and the blotting out of our transgressions. So that you don't need to sit and mope over past sins. You don't need to just sit there and say, oh, but I was so horrible a sinner. Oh, I did this and I did that and I did this and I did such horrible things. And you don't need to let that just press on you. God has forgiven it. It is wiped away. It's clean. It's gone. You don't have to face it ever again. For God's forgiveness is total and it is complete. David not so, man not so. Then Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king. And he had not dressed his feet. That is, he remember he was lame, and it could be that he had sores on his feet, and they would have to constantly dress them. But during the whole time that David was in exile, he did not dress his feet, nor did he trim his beard, nor did he wash his clothes. So he was a smelly, dirty mess by the time David saw him. But these were signs of mourning, of grieving over David being deposed. And it came to pass when David was come to Jerusalem, when he was come to Jerusalem to meet the king, that the king said unto him, why did you not go with me, Mephibosheth? Now, Mephibosheth probably came down. David had such a big crowd, he couldn't get through to David down at the river. So when David got back to Jerusalem, Mephibosheth came to him, and David said, hey, how come you didn't come with us, man? And he answered, my lord, O king, my servant, that is Ziba, deceived me. For thy servant said, I will saddle your donkey, that I might ride on it and go to the king, because your servant is lame. And he hath slandered your servant unto the Lord the king, my lord the king. But my lord the king is as an angel of God. Do therefore what is good in your eyes. Look, he lied about me. He saddled the donkey, but he didn't. I ordered him to bring me the donkey. He didn't. He took off. And of course, he took the donkeys that were saddled, gave them to David, and said, oh, Mephibosheth stayed back. And he lied about him. He said, well, they're giving me the throne now. And Mephibosheth said, I'm lame. I couldn't do anything. And this fellow has slandered me before you. But look, you're like an angel of God. You do what is ever good in your eyes. Do what's right, David. For all of my father's house were but dead men before my lord the king. Yet you did set your servant among them, and I ate at your table. What right have I yet to cry any more unto the king? What can I say? You've been so good to us. And what can I say? So the king said unto him, don't speak any more of your matters. I have said, you and Ziba shall divide the land. Now remember, he had told Ziba, hey, you can have all that pertains to Mephibosheth. Now David says, okay, fellas, divide it. So Ziba gets half, Mephibosheth retains half. And Mephibosheth said unto the king, yea, let him take all, for as much as my lord the king is come again in peace unto his own house. Hey, I'm so happy to have you back. He can have it all, David. I'm just thrilled that you're here. Now Barzillai, quite a name, isn't it? The Gileadite came from Rogelim, and he went over Jordan with the king to conduct him over the Jordan River. Barzillai was evidently a very wealthy man. When Mephibosheth had fled to Mahanaim, Barzillai had taken him in and cared for him. When David restored Mephibosheth, because Barzillai was a friend of Mephibosheth, when David came, took care of David and his people. He's an old man and a wealthy man, and now he comes as far as the Jordan to see David safely across. And Barzillai was a very aged man. He was 80 years old. And he had provided the king of sustenance while he was there at Mahanaim, for he was a very wealthy man. And the king said unto Barzillai, come over with me, and I will feed you in Jerusalem. Come on over, and I'll take care of you. Come on over to Jerusalem. Live there, I'll take care of you. Barzillai said unto the king, how long do I have to live, that I should go up to the king unto Jerusalem? I am this day 80 years old, and I can discern between good and evil. And can I discern between good and evil? I'm getting to be an old man. Can their servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Hey, eating is not a big thing with me anymore, and all. I don't have many taste buds left, and I can't hear anymore the voice of singing. I'm deaf, and I'm getting pretty decrepit, and so, the things around the palace they don't really have much appeal. I can't hear the voice of the singing men and the singing women. Why should I be a burden unto my lord the king? Thanks, but no thanks. Thy servant will go a little way over Jordan with the king, but why should you reward me with such a reward as this? Why should you recompense me with such a reward? Let your servant, I pray thee, turn back again, that I might die in my own city and be buried by the grave of my father and my mother. But behold, your servant Chimham, let him go over with my lord the king, and do unto him what seems good unto thee. So, I'm too old. I couldn't enjoy it. I'd just soon stay here and die. So the king answered, Chimham shall go over with me, and I will do to him that which shall seem good unto thee. And whatsoever you shall require of me, that I will do for thee. I'll do it for him in your stead, or for your sake. And all the people went over Jordan, and the king was come over, and the king kissed Barzillai, and he blessed him, and he returned to his own place. He went back to Mahanaim. And then the king went on to Gilgal, and Chimham went on with him, and all of the people of Judah conducted the king, and also half the people of Israel. And behold, all of the men of Israel came to the king, and they said unto the king, why have our brethren, the men of Judah, stolen thee away, and have brought the king and his household, and all of David's men with him over Jordan? And all of the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, because the king is near kin to us. Why then are you angry for this matter? For we have eaten at all of the king's expense, or have he given us any gift? Hey, we're here because he's of the tribe of Judah. We're the tribe of Judah. We're family, man. And, we haven't eaten at the king's table, or we have been no expense. We've done this on our own. And the men of Israel answered the men of Judah and said, we have 10 parts in the king. There's 10 tribes. You've got only 2. And we have also more right in David than you. Why then did you despise us, that our advice should not first be sought in bringing back our king? And the words of men of Judah were fiercer than the words. Oh, there's still problems, fellas. Israel now, the 10 tribes against the tribes of Judah. They were not totally unified, even under David's reign. They became a little more unified under Solomon's reign, but still, when Solomon's son took over, the division was complete. Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, could not hold the whole nation together. The 10 northern tribes joined together under the reign of Jeroboam, who they appointed king, and Rehoboam remained the king over the 2 southern tribes. And so the problems that sort of began here continued to fester until there was the breach, the break, the northern and the southern kingdoms, and then the resulting civil wars that took place under the nation of Israel. So that's as far as we're going to get tonight. Next week we'll take the chapters 20 and 21 and maybe 22. Who knows? We'll go as far as we can. May the Lord be with you. As we begin another week, may you be strengthened by the presence and the power of the Lord working in your life. May He guide you in each of the decisions that you'll be making. And may He draw you closer to Himself, that you might experience more fully that love, that deep, unfathomable love, that love that God demonstrated for you in sending His only Son to die in your stead. May we walk in the love of the Lord. May we be filled with the Spirit of the Lord. And may we be a light shining in this dark world, bringing hope unto men. The hope of a coming kingdom, a kingdom of righteousness and peace and joy, ruled by our King Jesus. God bless you and make you a true and faithful witness of God's love to others for Jesus' sake.